All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a review of this knife, and this is the Protech Godfather. So this is a knife that I wanted for a long time, and when where I live finally decided to, I guess, decriminalize automatic knives, I decided to get it in celebration of that and some other things. So I got this a little while ago at the beginning of the year here, and have been carrying and using it a lot and just haven't done a review yet, but I really love this knife, so I wanted to, finally get to reviewing it. So this is a knife made in the USA by Protech, and Protech is a very well thought of company in the automatic knife market. So they make really nice automatic knives and are kind of, one of the classic automatic knife makers. And this Godfather is one of their classic models, and it's pretty, I think, evident why right away. It has this really striking design with what I would consider to be a coffin-shaped handle, and then this bayonet, but really dagger-like blade shape that comes to just this absolutely ridiculously fine point. And so it looks very nasty. It looks very kind of, you know, Godfather-esque. And to me, even more than that, kind of medieval, really. I think of traditional European, daggers, like medieval daggers and Renaissance daggers and things like that. It reminds me of that. And I think that it really is kind of a continuation of this type of knife. So this is a Frank B stiletto. It's an Italian-made knife, and it is a traditional stiletto. It's also very long, so it's hard to put the whole knife into the frame. But you can see that it has similar, kind of design language. It doesn't necessarily have a coffin-shaped handle, but it has a similar, widening towards the butt. It has a swing guard, whereas the Godfather has a flare out here for the guard, but then it has a similar kind of dagger style blade, and it's very long and thin. So this is kind of the classic Italian stiletto, which really came from, again, the daggers and hand knives of European history. And I think that the Protech Godfather is kind of a worthy successor to the Italian stiletto. It has the same feel, but a little bit more modern features. So, the push button is both the release and the lock, whereas, on a lot of traditional stilettos, you can fire it with the push button, but then you have to unlock it by pressing either a back lock, or sometimes there's a lever, things like that. On the Protech, you can open and close it one-handed because you press this button, which is very nicely right in the center of the handle, right below the pivot, and then you can just press the button and close it like so. I really have no trouble one-hand closing this knife. I've seen some people kind of say that they're difficult to close, but I don't find it to be difficult to close at all. So it has that. It also has a pocket clip, unlike most traditional, automatic stilettos. And so you can carry this knife a lot easier. I found this knife to be very easy to carry for its length, because it is so slender. So I do like long, slender knives. I think that they are easy to carry and allow you to have a lot of edge. Now, another thing is, because it has a little bit taller blade. Now, of course, this is still a very slender blade. It is not, by all means like a kitchen knife. It's not made for true slicing, but it has a little bit taller blade, a little bit more of a grind, again, compared to the traditional stiletto, which is really not made to cut much at all. It's made to poke things. But the Godfather, certainly can poke things. There's no question of that. But it can also cut pretty well. I use this knife as an EDC knife, and used it for EDC tasks, cutting normal things, cutting cardboard, things like that. And it actually works perfectly fine. I think you could have this as your EDC knife, but it's not really EDC size. So give you some size comparisons here. Here is a Civivi Elementum, what a lot of people really consider to be a good EDC size. And then here is a Spyderco Police 4 lightweight, which is a very large knife for most people. And you can see the Godfather is a little smaller, a little shorter, but kind of in line with the Police 4 Lightweight, a lot closer to it than to, again, what a lot of people would consider to be an EDC size knife like the Elementum. Now, one thing is that I wouldn't really consider this to be a hard use and maybe even tactical or self-defense knife. I don't really carry knives for those reasons, but the interesting thing, if you look at how this works, there's a stop pin here. This is where the lock locks when the knife is open. And then when you open this knife, if you look in here, there's actually a really, really small amount of blade that actually is, you know, the neck of the knife, or however you want to call it there. There's not very much material between the blade and the pivot. It's not a whole lot more than a 1/4 inch, you know, maybe 3/8 of an inch, something like that. And that's just because of how this lock works. When this knife is closed, the lock is sitting in there. And so then when you open it, the lock sits again in this area here. But that need for the lock to go up to here makes it so there's very little actual, you know, material between the blade, the edge part, and the pivot. So, you know, I think that this knife, if you, for some crazy reason, were prying with this knife, which is not recommended. First of all, I think the tip would break first. But if you were prying somehow with this part of the knife, like stuck it in something and then pried on it, I think that it wouldn't, you know, I'm not saying it would be likely to break, but it would be more likely than a knife with a different lock. So I don't necessarily think of these automatic push button automatic knives as, you know, heavy use or tactical knives. Honestly, I think it's mostly just really cool and really fun, and it kind of, I guess, scratches an itch for me of wanting to have a dagger style knife, a traditional dagger style knife, but has those modern kind of materials and features that I mentioned earlier. So I really love this knife. I, like I said, have carried and used it a lot. I think it's a great knife, and it's actually not terribly priced. So this full-sized Godfather, there is a smaller version with a 3-inch blade, which probably would be, you know, more along most people's EDC kind of size. But this full-size version with the 4-inch blade is about $210 at most places. I'm sure their prices will go up soon. I know some of their models, the prices did go up recently, but I did see some of these go, you know, live, become available on some dealer sites relatively recently, and they were still at that $210 price range. So I think for a USA made automatic knife, that's a pretty good price. Now, the handle is aluminum, like a lot of automatic knives, and the steel is 154 cm. A lot of people might kind of poo-poo 154 cm. It's a fine steel, you know. This knife isn't made to cut through a whole bunch of cardboard. 154 cm is fine. I don't really have any issue with it, and it's what Protech uses a lot of the time. They are kind of starting to use MagnaCut and things like that, but 154 cm for me is fine. And I think $210, not too bad. Now, I will say I got this from Knife Ship Free, and I used some of my rewards points, so I got it for a little bit less than that. But you can, I'm not sure if Knife Ship Free still has them, but if they do, use the link in my description. And, you know, you can check around and see if you can find somewhere that has a discount. You can use code Knife Thoughts at a lot of places. But I really love this Godfather, this Protech Godfather. I think if you are looking for a dagger style automatic knife, this is pretty much the go-to. There are some other options out there from other companies, but I think that this one really does it the best aesthetically, and Protech is known for, you know, making really high quality automatic knives. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this knife. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my other social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.